This video is going to talk about extinction, and I start off with a polar bear here because unfortunately, due to climate change, polar bears are expected to go extinct probably within about 100 years. So when we're talking about extinction, it's important that we define a couple terms. So biological extinction just means that's it. The last member of that species has died. Background extinction is just the natural low rate of extinction. So if we think of, no human interference, no asteroids or big crazy changes to the environment, extinction is natural. So the background extinction is that natural rate of extinction. And then when we're talking about extinction rates, we just mean the percentage or the number of species that are going extinct in a certain time period, and I'll give some examples of these in a second. So in the last 500 million years, there have been 3 to 5 mass extinction events. Most scientists would agree that there were 5 mass extinctions. Some are a little more conservative and say, well, maybe there were just 3. The other ones don't quite qualify. But in any case, that last mass extinction event was about 65 million years ago when the dinosaurs went extinct. During these mass extinctions, between 50 and 95% of all species living at the time become extinct. Now, the current extinction rate is about 100 times higher than the typical background extinction rate of, I guess that would be 1/10,000th of a percent. So things aren't looking so great. We're actually losing about 50,000 species per year. And below you can see some examples of the species that we've already seen go extinct. Things like the passenger pigeon, the dodo, the golden, I think they're called golden frogs, golden tree frogs. So it's happening. Human activities are causing a lot of these extinctions. So human activities have disturbed over 50% of Earth's land surface, and in some areas and some ecosystems up to 80%. So we're really changing environments very quickly, and organisms either just have no place to live anymore or they can't adapt fast enough. Speciation is also likely to be reduced, so the number of species that are actually evolving to take the place of the species that are going extinct is not happening as fast as it has in the past. One reason is we are degrading really diverse environments, so places like the rainforest that naturally has a lot of different ecological niches, we're basically chopping all that down, and unfortunately we're favoring certain species, we call them opportunistic species, that are able to outcompete other species. So we're seeing much less diversity in the types of species that are thriving right now. So things like Norwegian rats, dandelions, and cockroaches, they'll do great pretty much no matter what we do. It's useful to identify organisms whose populations are decreasing relatively rapidly. Your book talks about one way of designating these organisms or labeling that's more, I guess, worldwide. I'm going to introduce the labeling that we use in the United States under the Endangered Species Act. So an endangered species, it just means that there's so few members of that species left that they could easily soon become extinct if nothing is changed. Now, a threatened species are also sometimes called vulnerable species. There are still enough members to survive, but if things don't change, they will likely become endangered soon, which then can lead to their extinction. So some examples of endangered species here, some types of wolves, lions. So over 17,000 of the world's identified species are listed as endangered or threatened. In the United States, that number is over 1,300 species. So the following species are considered endangered. These species as well are endangered mostly because of human activities. So the California condor here and the whooping cranes have both suffered under the hand of people through mostly hunting. So some characteristics that make species especially vulnerable to extinction are things like having a really low reproductive rate, meaning you don't reproduce very often, you only make maybe one offspring at a time. Organisms that have a really specialized niche are vulnerable as well. So if the environment changes a little bit, they can't survive anymore. If they have a really narrow distribution as well, so if we have a desert pupfish, they're a fish that lives in the desert. Well, if the pool that they're living in dries up and they only live in one little area, then that's it, they go extinct. Organisms that live at feed at high trophic levels are more prone to extinction if they have fixed migratory patterns, if they're already rare, if they're commercially valuable, then there's a much bigger incentive for people to be hunting them, and then if they have very large territories, that's a problem if parts of their territory are being damaged through habitat destruction, deforestation, fragmentation, and other things like that. So what we're seeing here is the percent of various species that are threatened with premature extinction. So of the animals, fish and amphibians are especially vulnerable. Plants are vulnerable as well. Think about a plant, it can't exactly move. So if we destroy its habitat, that's it. We're also losing genetic diversity, and so the gene pools of the species that do exist are getting smaller and smaller. That means there's just less variety within a species. So they are less able to adapt to environmental change. They can't evolve as well because there aren't those natural variations within the species. They're also more likely to have problems with interbreeding, where we get rare genetic diseases or problems that pop up in the population. So we're seeing that in species like giant pandas, cheetahs, Florida panthers. So there are a lot of reasons why we should care about extinction. Species provide a lot of natural resources and natural services, so they pollinate all the food crops we use. They provide natural pest control. They're important in biogeochemical cycles like the nitrogen cycle and the carbon cycle. They also contribute economic services, so they have instrumental value. We eat them, we use them for fuel and lumber and medicine. We enjoy watching them. And it's going to take a long time to gain back the species diversity that we're losing right now. So we might not be around, humans might not be around in 5 to 10 million years. Life will exist, it's going to be different, and for a long time, it will probably be a lot less diverse. And then finally, if we think about the intrinsic value of organisms, then we can say that, well, every species has a right to exist, so of course we should care about this problem.